Alright guys, so this is the moment I've been waiting for. I've got everything on the table here for the build. We're going to start out with the Intel Core i7 4790K quad-core processor. We're going to be putting this into the Gigabyte Z97X Gaming 5 motherboard. We've got the Asus Strix GeForce GTX 980 GPU, as well as the Corsair 2400 MHz 16 gigabytes of RAM in the Vengeance Pro series. We have the Be Quiet Dark Rock Pro 3 heatsink, which is going to be keeping all this stuff nice and cool, along with the Corsair LED Red Quiet Edition fans. We're going to power all this stuff with the Seasonic 520 watt 80 plus platinum power supply, and we're putting all of it right into the massive Corsair Graphite Series 760T full tower case. This thing is a beast, and it has a really nice window that's going to show off our red and black theme throughout. So let's get right into the build. Alright, so now that we have the case on its side and we have the door unhinged and removed, we can start to install the motherboard. And the first step to this is going to be putting on the shield here. So it's just going to go right in here behind our fan. There's one side and the next. There it is. Alright, so now that we have that plate in there, I'm just going to remove this stock fan because I'm going to put my own fan in that spot there, and it'll give us a little more room to be able to fit the motherboard in just right. So just got to remove a couple screws here. And the fan is removed. Now we've got lots of room to be able to place the motherboard very gently into place. Okay, so now we're going to just start screwing in the motherboard. Alright, now that we've got that motherboard in there nice and secure, we're going to be putting in the power supply to get that out of the way quickly. Alright, next we're going to put on the CPU. Alright, so this is the heatsink that comes with the 4790K CPU, but we're not going to be using that. We're going to be using our Dark Rock Pro 3, so we can just set that aside. Alright, so now that we have that in there, you can just slide that under. There we go. Just going to take a little bit of pressure here, and just like that we have our CPU installed. Okay, so now we're going to install this case fan into the back. Alright, so as of right now we've installed the motherboard, we have the rear exhaust fan installed, and the power supply installed. All I've done since then is started to plug in some of the cables running from the front I/O, connecting that to the power supply, all the fans, and just started to do some cable management at the back here. I'll show you what we've got going on back here. I've started the process of just looping everything through the appropriate holes so that everything's really clean at the front here. So right about now I'm gonna do an easier step, and I'm going to install some RAM. If you get a look at this RAM, it's pretty sweet. The Vengeance Pro series, it's gonna go really well with the color theme we got here. There we go. Our RAM is now installed. Alrighty, now we're going to be installing the top 2 fans into the top of the case, just so that I've got enough room to be able to get my heatsink in there nice and snug. I'm not trying to reach around to put these fans in after the fact. Now that we have that finished, we're going to be installing the SSD into one of these convenient little slots back here. Alright, so now that we have all of our cables set up through the back, we're going to start to install the heatsink onto the CPU. So I've got these brackets on here, and now I'm just going to secure the back mount and mount on the CPU on the front. After a little bit of a struggle here, we have the mount set up, and it is time for me to add the thermal paste and to install the heatsink onto the CPU. As you see, I had to remove one of these RAM because I was just worried about some clearance, and once I tested it, I realized I do have the clearance for the RAM, but I'm going to just take it off for now so that I can get the heatsink on, and then afterwards I'll actually have an easier time putting the RAM in, as opposed to trying to put the heatsink over top and work around the RAM. It's just going to work easier this way. So, onto the paste application. Okay, so now that I have that in place, I can just tighten these screws a little more to make sure it is nice and snug. So now that that's nice and tight on our CPU, we can get into the next step, which is going to be plugging the heatsink into the motherboard. So what's really nice about the heatsink is that there's only one cable to plug in here. Both fans are connected to it, and it plugs right into the top CPU fan location. Just gotta make sure it's lined up right. Okay, so if you look in here, this is pressed right up against the heatsink. That's what I'm talking about. It is so close. And if we try and go look under, you can see that this RAM slot is completely blocked off. There's no way you're getting any memory in there at all. But we got ours in, which I guess is a victory, a small victory. Alright, so as you can see, we've got only one more thing to install, and it's hard to believe considering there's so few wires coming in at the front of the case here, but that's because I gotta pat myself in the back here because I did a really good job at looping all those cables in to the back for the cable management area. And now all there is to do is insert our video card, which is that Asus Strix GeForce GTX 980. So I've installed these cool little stickers onto the GPU, but unfortunately they're going to be facing down, so they're not even really going to be seen, but still a cool touch. Okay, so now we are into our cable management part, and by the magic of video editing, you're gonna see this all come together super duper fast. All right, so there you have it. There is our cables. Everything's tucked away pretty nicely. I mean, it's not the best cable management in the world, but it's gonna do pretty well. It's also not crazy messy with cables all over the place and out of control. Everything is tied away and in its own little area. I tried to keep things as neat as possible, but yeah, that's pretty much as good as that's gonna get back there. Alright, so I finally got all the components of the build inside the case. We had a few bumps along the way trying to fit the GPU in around the heatsink as well as the RAM. The heatsink is just huge, so I had some clearance issues. At first I wasn't sure if the heatsink was gonna block the by 16 PCI Express lane for the GPU, but upon further review and moving the heatsink a little bit, I was actually able to fit that in. I know that you guys saw me install it in the by 8 slot, but it's now in the by 16 slot. We also had some cable issues. I was using those red cables, which unfortunately were not compatible with the power supply, so I wasn't getting enough power to the motherboard. But I switched those, and now we should be getting a lot better power, and all the cables seem to be hooked up. Everything seems to be ready to go, so let's see if we can get this thing to power on. The moment of truth. So we've got power to the back of it. I'm gonna just flick this switch here. See, we got lights on the GPU, that's a good sign. And then hit the power button. And there we go, we've got our lights and our fans. Everything seems to be working well. And in a second here, we should get something up on our screen to enter the BIOS. And we do, so that's awesome. So far so good. Everything's working. I'm gonna go through the BIOS and let you guys know how that went after. Alright guys, so that's it for the build. Let me know what you guys thought in the comment section down below, and if you liked it, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Subscribe for more content coming soon, and as always, thanks for watching.